there's a great opportunity for a contrarian ascension or retention. So ascend or retain through a contrarian stance. If you can take a contrarian stance, that could be a reason why someone buys. Like they just believe you've got the way.
Man, you and I met because of a mastermind, and then you just came back from another one. What's your takeaways from your most recent mastermind?
So this was Driven. It's Perry Belcher's, Jason Fladlien, and Qasim. It's Aslam. I always remember Qasim is awesome. That's how I know how to pronounce his name. But
he hasn't given a mnemonic for his last name though.
Yeah, but people just know Qasim. Qasim is awesome. And if you've been in the that digital marketer world, you usually know Qasim. And so actually Driven, just for a quick backstory, so there was War Room, which is a long-standing mastermind that had Ryan Dice and Roland Frazier and Perry Belcher, who ran that for probably like a decade or more. And that was all in the digital marketer world, right? Because I was at Traffic Conversions. They'd done all these sort of ventures together. And so that's how they had that. And so there's a lot of folks kind of coming from that side of the world. I was never in that world. I literally, I don't think I've ever given digital marketer $1.
Which is surprising because you're a really good consumer.
I know. I'm such a good consumer. But it just didn't hit me. I got hooked into a different world of marketing and felt no need to even try to consume any of their content stuff, which is a bummer for me because I just missed out on that whole diverse space over there. So anyway, they War Room split, and so now there's Founders Board and Scalable, which is kind of Ryan Dice's, and I think Ryan and Roland went that way, and then Perry partnered up with Jason Fladlien and Qasim and created Driven. So this was the Driven Mastermind, and it was awesome. It was great. All of these kind of I don't want to call them higher level masterminds, but when you're getting into any masterminds, well, not all of them like this, but I feel like in this circle, there's a common theme, which is you're going to hear from the founders or the people who are leading it, kind of what they're doing, and they kind of pull their network of other folks that are doing it. And so you've got, a pedigree of the people who founded it, and then the pedigree or the exposure and insights of other folks that just who do they pull into the room,
right?
And so you'd be like, how did I end up there? It was actually I know him more so, but I didn't deeply know Perry, right? Because I wasn't in that space. It was Qasim, and the connection was affiliate stuff. So we were both, high-ranking affiliates, and then Qasim affiliated our stuff. And so instant connection relationship there. We spoke at JC's summit in Costa Rica. That was also another connection point. Both Qasim and I were on stage there. And then I heard them starting this mastermind, and I'm a consumer of masterminds. I'm an easy buyer. And so when you get in this kind of space, though, when you're doing it, you're in, not everybody does what I do. I don't even know if it's recommended, but I buy and I just stay. Why do you do that? Because there's a lot of common threads, or it can be paralysis. I actually do not recommend trying to get a million different voices and ideas in your head because, execution is everything. Yeah. Ideas are worthless. And so even when I approach, I'm kind of looking for that. I'm looking for what's my one idea? And so now we're getting into how to just attend mastermind.
Sure.
Come with what's the one thing that I want to achieve while I'm there, and then I'm listening for what's the one idea I'm going to take away.
Smart.
And that's my cap. And the rest of the time I'm just enjoy, just connect. And I've spoken about this before in terms of live event marketing. This is a form of live event marketing, but it's face to face, toes to toes. You get folks' attention and their time in a way that you can't do it in other ways. And so, for example, I'll give folks insight into my motivation, because they do events quarterly, and I've been in the mastermind and I attend about one event per year. And so sometimes when you get folks to this, they'll move around different areas. I had a hunch based on location who would attend. So this was Vegas, and the conversation that I wanted to have was someone based in Vegas. I don't want to talk too much about this. It feels like I don't know if
I don't think you need to go into specifics of it, but the idea is strong.
There's a thoughtfulness there, right? Even if you've got a connection, even Qasim, I mean, we share phone numbers, we'll talk and text, but I actually wouldn't even expect to call Qasim and be hey, let's chat for an hour kind of a thing. It's just you're doing life. However, very easy to hang out, at dinner or after dinner or whatever it is, or in the mornings and breakfast, and have long conversations you couldn't otherwise have. And so, and there's just a different type of attention there. So I really love I love in-person marketing because it's back to the basics of like, what is marketing? Connecting people, but the premise is different. You're less distracted.
Well, we met Qasim. Did you know Qasim before the Steve Sims event, or did we meet him together that same night? Because I feel like yeah.
No, I knew him through.
Well,
Wait, were
you
you
guys
at
both
Steve?
spoke at the Commitment Summit, so I guess you didn't know each other before that.
We both spoke there, and I guess I didn't even remember you were at Steve.
Yeah,
Sims
the one
event.
in LA. Yeah, because I remember what was so fascinating is everyone was kind of together, and then we went to another place, but like we needed to drive, and I had driven in, so I drove over. The reason I'm saying this is it is so fascinating how the type of communication, the type of conversations you have when you're just kind of doing real day-to-day stuff is creates such a more human connection compared to like, oh, let's jump on a Zoom or I'm going to send emails back and forth. And I think there's a lot of value in creating deeper relationships when you're in person and kind of like for a weekend or 2 days.
Yep. And it's just a different context because as the barrier to entry to, like, let's say running ads, someone discover you because you run ads, barrier to entry is very low. It's like, pay Facebook a couple $100 and they will put your ads out there. Now, obviously there's exposure. If someone's like, I see your face everywhere, they're like, okay, I'm spending a little bit more than $100, but technically barrier to entry for like someone seeing that you exist, very low. Barrier to entry to, like, one, you got to pay to be in the mastermind, then you got to show up and prioritize and all the sort of things. It's just a different thing. So you'll put it in different contexts and all that. Like a good example, for me, it's funny, people that you connect with in different scenarios. So actually it was at Steve Sims' event. He did a mastermind. Jason Fladlian, who now runs this mastermind, I first met him. So he was somebody who I met at Steve Sims' event. How did I first know that he existed? I think he was speaking to a room of 5,000 people, and I was just one of the 5,000. So first context of, like, on my radar, I'm like, oh, you're legit. Also, you're on a stage in front of 5,000 people, and I am one of 5,000 attendees. And I remember, like, he left an impression. I've heard a lot of, like, big speakers, like Jason left an impression. I was like, dude knows webinars. And then also what was unique about his model is he does multiple 8 figures via, like, a pressure launch kind of a thing. And so, like, when you're like, what do you do? Well, it wasn't even what do you, when you're hearing someone from stage or whatever it is, they're like, breaking down their method of, like, here's how we did 57 million on one webinar launch, or one pressure launch webinar. You're like, oh, you're in a different category. You're like, that's just like, oh yeah, I know 5 other people that do the same thing. I know no one else that even if I know someone who does that much revenue in a year, it takes a year. It doesn't take 2 weeks, or at least it's not like, it's not Super Bowl style performance or, on that level. And you get to sit down and chat. And I remember when I talked to him before, I like, ask and listen. And so I asked a question about, like, what's your focus for the next year? And I remember, and I came back, and here I'm seeing him again in place. And he'd be like, how did it go? And he remembered our conversation.
Well, there's 2 sides so far that you're addressing, right? Which I love. And just to recap, kind of your intention going in is what's, like, the one thing I want to accomplish, either a conversation, someone to meet, whatever that may be. And then I like that you simplify the exit as what's my one big takeaway instead of, like, a laundry list of hundreds of notes that probably won't ever get implemented. It's like, what's one thing I learned that I can go and do? That,
yeah. So just as it's helpful to anybody, live event marketing, or, like, if you're thinking about putting on a mastermind, do it like that, like, that's what I think about, is if I can just give one thing. Now you end up having to deliver a ton of value because it might be different to, the person who's going to, everybody could grab a different thing. But as an attendee, that's how I think about it.
So yeah, did you have a big takeaway?
So there's 2 things. Was, call it tactically. There was a Perry actually broke down. This is a classic thing. I think he's taught before, but it's just you're in the right place to hear it at the right time. And so one of the things he was breaking down, I think he credited to someone else. Maybe it wasn't his thing, but it was in a conversation. He's breaking down, like, the reasons why. Was it why someone buys? And my tactical nugget was the contrast, or the contrarian. So, like, we've heard this, like, I subscribe to a newsletter called Contrarian Crew, or this is Cody Sanchez.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. She spoke at the summit we were sponsoring or exhibiting at. And so this idea of you attract folks by being a contrarian. This is the everyone thinks it's this, but it's actually that. And I actually heard a few times during presentations and talks. Qasim does this. Maybe he's practiced it. I heard a lot from how he will speak about it. Is like everything that you've ever been taught about Google Ads and placement and pixels is absolutely wrong and will absolutely fail you. And that's the hook. Very contrarian. It's like what's common knowledge is wrong. But let me tell you, this is the sliver of the way that it actually makes sense. As simple as that seems, so folks are like, Matt, you flew and got a hotel and traveled all this way and like that was your thing. And I would say like, yes. In its application, here's what that looks like is I was realizing there are certain areas in our even post-purchase cycle where I realize I think there's a great opportunity for a contrarian ascension or retention. So ascend or retain through a contrarian stance. And so here was my thought. This is a little bit deeper marketing here, but so typically, so he was saying if you can take a contrarian stance, that could be a reason why someone buys. Like they just believe you've got the way. And I'm not very contrarian. I'm just like not that way naturally. I'm also, you could say in the same way in there, it's in the line of confrontational. Like there are people who like, that's how they draw attention. They create conflict. They like to confront with folks. A classic example of this, I feel like, is Dan Henry. And I just see him as like the epitome of the create conflict and sell that way is just like pick fights. I think he'd probably say he's matured. He's less like this than he was, maybe years ago. But there's an underlying feeling of that. Like,
and I think he's still just as contrarian, just less personal. Like he won't necessarily go after an individual anymore as much as a concept.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more matured. He's still this antagonistic marketing works, but I'm not going to antagonize a person. Maybe I'll antagonize a concept there. And I've seen, you're right. He still does it. He'll post stuff about gender roles or something like that, which are like has nothing to do with business, but he just knows it's like the car accident marketing where it's like, man, if there's a car accident, people slow down and they look and their attention is there. And so in the game of getting attention, you can get attention by just creating conflict. I'm not that way. That's not my style at all. So it would feel disingenuous if I just started if my front end marketing became that way. I actually did that once. I tried a conflict style marketing thing and it felt like just awkward. And even if it worked, it was just like not me. But the contrarian stance for ascension and retention is, or at least that's how I was thinking about it. So once someone's a buyer, they've already committed. And like to some degree, they've committed. They just made the purchase. What I realized is, is there a possibility to make part of their indoctrination, welcome, you're part of us, is to introduce a contrarian stance that motivates someone to ascension. So a good example of this would be if I sell soap. And I sell soap, and let's say it's dishwashing soap, and you're like, they just bought their dishwashing soap. And part of my saying like, welcome, here's the dishwashing soap. Now, I'm sure you're probably using the soap with a sponge, but everything you've ever heard about sponges, everyone's told you about sponges is absolutely wrong and can ruin your life. I'm going to tell you something. That like very few people know, and I really wish more people did. And then I tell you about all the maladies of sponges and my journey of how sponges are horrible and they almost ruined my life. And so what I did is I sought out and I invented the magical, amazing sponge. And honestly, I think everyone should have it. It's a necessity. It changes your life. Your kids will love you more. Your marriages will be better. And I want to get this in many people's hands as possible. So what I've done is put together a way where I can give you the sponge for free. If you buy a year's worth of my soap, which you already just signed up to get, you're going to get it monthly anyways. But if you sign up for a year right now, I will actually give you my magical sponge for free. That was the aha, if anyone's tracking. And so, they've bought in, and now maybe a compelling reason is to take a contrarian stance on something that is complementary to what they just purchased. And the proposition is fast forward the decision you were going to make. In my world, it's subscription stuff. So if you just subscribe to the SaaS, it's like, hey, you just signed up for the SaaS. you're set to go monthly. On day one, most folks' motivation is not, I'm signing up for this and I want to unsubscribe 30 days from now. So it's like they're already it's an easy thing to say you're already planning on doing this. But through a contrarian stance, you can create desire for that ascension and then and make that offer there. So that was my takeaway.
I really like that. I like the soap example. I feel like it makes sense. And I feel like it's a good way to increase lifetime value. And yeah, really cool. Very solid takeaway. Yeah. What else?
This is well, it's funny you said that. Subtly, I also learned, this wasn't going to be my big takeaway, but it's subconsciously got in my mind. You know why they call them soap operas? Like the shows?
But isn't that who used to sponsor them?
Yeah. Soap opera shows were invented by Procter & Gamble to sell more soap. They created the drama series. And what they would do, and this is what they found, is like when you have this suspended reality, which is what stories do and shows do for us, is we're in this almost like magical trance state. You are more, in a sense, more susceptible. You're more optimistic. You're in a better buying mindset. This is why like stories sell. And so Procter & Gamble started these soap operas where they would get, the majority of the audience was women who were just entrenched in these dramatic stories. And then they would break them up with commercials for literally soap. And they used it to sell more soap. And I think it's funny. I learned that as well here. And it just somehow subtly made its way into my example of, what do? You got your soap opera. They just bought the soap. How do you sell them more soap? You create a contrarian story about sponges, and then you say, buy more soap and I'll give you my sponge for free. And so that was my big takeaway there. And then the other win was that conversation happened. And I'll actually kind of unpack this a little more businessy than marketing. Here's my ask. If you're hanging out, if you're getting a ton of value from this, I usually don't ask. If this was good, please share it with somebody. This is it. This is how I find out about good stuff. And if you've enjoyed this at this point, I'm about to, break down some more deep marketing and business stuff. If you've enjoyed it, please do share it. Or leave us a review. I'd always love a review. That takes less time. Maybe that's even easier for you. Just go down there, punch those stars, and move on with your life. And so here was my takeaway. There's this idea in the stock market, and I'm not a big trader or anything like that, but of options. People maybe know this. You can buy options. Even companies will grant options. It basically says, I'm going to pay whatever it is. I'll pay $3 today to have the option to sell your stock at $20 for the next year. And maybe the stock is worth $18. And so it's like, I have the option to sell for 20, but no one would buy it. Like it's literally $18 right now. And so I'm buying the option to sell it again or buy it for myself. Basically, I'm buying the option to buy it at a value greater than what it has today. But that's the gamble is you're saying I'll pay $3 to sell it for 20, and maybe 4 months from now it boosts up and now it's worth 25. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Now I could buy it for 20, sell it for 25 the same day. I made a net of 5. It cost me 3 in my fictitious example to buy the option. And I was able to, arbitrage that, sell for 5. I netted 2. Hopefully you're tracking with this. This is kind of like a stock world, not the application here. What I learned about is this idea, they call it the golden lasso. And so in selling businesses, what you can do is go to somebody. It kind of works well if there's friends, if there's trust, or if they're in the same kind of world and area. I think someone was saying this is the model for A1 garages. I'm not sure. I don't know that real example, but I'll use that mechanic example. Let's say you've got a couple of different mechanic shops all in the same town, and you go around and say, hey, can I just buy an option? Because what I'm trying to do is roll this up. Because if I've got one, mechanic garage that, it does $1 million a year and it nets $300,000. Cool. It's $1 million business, $300,000. It's not very sellable. That's a high paying job is in effect what it is. But you go around and you go to your 3 other buddies and you're all kind of the same thing. Now we've got 4, but I bought options to them. I said, hey, here's $20,000 for the option to buy your business at whatever $1 million garage is worth. And you go a little bit more. Let's say they're, because at that level, maybe the business is worth, 1x EBITDA. And you say, I'll value it at 2x. You go around, you got 4 of them together. Now you've got a $4 million business that does $1.2 million in net profit. It's in a category where now a bigger buyer would value it more. And they might say, for your service-based business, I'll pay you $6 million for that business, whatever it is. Or, there's different tiers and levers there. You didn't buy any of those businesses. I might have gone around and given each one of them $20,000 for an option to basically buy and then sell their business at a higher value. The option expires. I say, if I can't do this in the next year, like, you just keep the money. I just gifted you $20,000. And so, if we're tracking with the math, let's say they each were netting $300,000. And I said, I bought an option to buy your business for $600,000. And they might have gone for that. They're like, hey, if I could sell the business right now for $600,000, I'd be happy. I'd walk away. And the point of it is, it's more than what market fair rate would be, what they could get themselves. If you've got 3 of those plus your own, what is that? That's $1.8 million. That's what you got to pay out to your friends. If I gave them each $20,000, I'm $60,000 out to like buy these options. But if I turn around and sell this thing, in my example, for $6 million, what happened? I give all my friends, I pay out 1.8. That's right. Yeah, 6 each, 1.8 to them. And I've got 4.2 for me. And I took a business that, like, fair market rate, if I just like had it and tried to go and sell it, it might have been, maybe $500,000 someone would have bought it for, right? It's like, mine's worth 5. I gave them all options for 6, right? More than its value there. And I bundled them all together. I bought no businesses. I did output some money, $60,000, but I didn't have to manage them. I didn't have to change ownership. I didn't have to do anything. I just bought the option for that business and was able to turn around, bundle them together, and together they're worth more. And now, instead of me just selling my one business for, $500,000, I sold all my friends' businesses. They're happy. They got more than market rate. I'm very happy because I did the groundwork, because I put up some risk to buy the options. In a sense, I was able to sell my business for, to that example, like, $4.2 million as opposed to $500,000. And what I did was assemble all of these parts together. And so that was another takeaway that I got through a conversation. And I'll tell you the downside. So you're thinking this is all great. Here's the downside, or the risk, as you're the risk taker. They were saying this process of doing it, the golden lasso, can be stressful because everybody has insight into the deal. So at the day where it's like, we're signing on the dotted line, they see I'm taking 4.2 million, and they used to be happy with 600,000, but they could say, you know what? Pound sand. I want 1 million, right? I want 1 million now because I think it's unfair. You're getting all this payout. Like, I'm only getting 600,000 now. And you can try and tell them, like, well, I paid you $20,000 for this option. Like, that's a contractual binding deal. The issue is they can basically explode the deal. And so it works if you've got folks you trust, who are like fine with, like,
a little bit mature,
you're basically, yeah, a little bit more mature, and you're like, they know it's like you're doing the groundwork. Like, you are shopping the deal, you are assembling this, because like, they're not friends all with each other usually. It's like you made the connections, you pulled this all together, and yeah, your payout's going to be, in that example, 10x. It's not 10x, 8x.
Yeah. What
their payout is. So you're happy with yours, but I'm getting whatever 6 times or 8 times whatever you're getting because I'm making it happen. But that's the risk, is because you could have, basically the more people you do it with, the more risk it is, because it only takes one person to blow up the deal. Because you're usually assembling to that cliff. So in that example where it's like, I just needed over $1 million profit to be in this threshold, one person controls that, because you're not usually like overreaching it. You're not going to be like, let me assemble 5 people together, just in case 2 people want to, or 2 people want to back out. I've got some space there. You're usually like just doing enough to what you need, getting the maximum value of what it is there, but you run the risk of, so you got to know there's high trust, there's a little bit mature expectations. But so that was my other business takeaway from the mastermind.
I like it. Anything coming up for you that that your listeners need to know is happening?
Subscribe to the newsletter if you're not already subscribed. Hopefully, if you're here and you're listening and you don't know that it exists, our Margin Makers newsletter will keep you in the loop, and we do have some fun stuff going on. And so that's, I'm sure there's going to be a link around the description, stuff like that. So make sure you're make sure you're paying attention to those emails because we pack them full of value.
Awesome.